Welcome to everyone joining our assembly on International Women's Day. Today we have a fantastic speaker, Lily Rosengard, who will be talking to us about their work and the importance of International Women's Day.
Lily has spoken to the UN and works for an incredible organization, Plan International, which seeks to advance women's rights around the world. They focus on advancing the opportunities of young women and girls in various aspects of life, such as education, health, and youth empowerment.
And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and they'll be addressed near the end. We'd like to thank Lily for their time and taking the opportunity to let us know about the essential work of their organisation, all the way from New York.
Great. Thank you for that really wonderful introduction. I'm really thrilled to be here. As a former Latimerian myself, it's always really special to get the special invite to come and speak at Latimer again. I did come speak a few years ago for the Feminist Society, and that was really great. And this is also so exciting. So I really appreciate it. As your peers have said, my name is Lily Rosengard. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a Londoner, but I'm based right now in New York, in Brooklyn. I have a lot that I would love to share with you, but also I want to make sure it's also interactive and you can ask questions in the chat. And I would really want to make sure that I can answer what you want to know as well. I've been given some guiding questions about how you want to learn about, for example, my journey from Latimer, from the main hall to the halls of the UN. So I'll do that, hopefully stopping on a few other important topics that are close to my heart along the way, like intersectionality, why it's important to be an intersectional feminist, acknowledging our power and privilege, and these kind of topics. So I'll be going through those. But first, I actually want to make a statement, which is a land acknowledgement. It's not something that I grew up with in England, given the history of England, for example, but it's something that since moving away from the UK, I was living in Australia for a while, and now I'm living in America. And a land acknowledgement is something I didn't know much about, but now I do. And it's really important to recognize the land in which we are situated, for example. So I know you're in London, but I'm going to share because I am here in New York. So it goes like this. The land on which I myself am on right now is part of the ancient homeland and traditional territory of the Lenape people. And so I really want to honor and respect the Lenape people and other indigenous caretakers of the land and the waters of which I am now, and the elders that have lived here before, and the indigenous today and the generations to come. So want to just make sure that that is front and center because the land was never ceded and it was stolen. So I want to make sure that that is shared at the very beginning of my talk, as I would for all other talks that I do and go to here in New York. So who am I? Why am I here? Why are you listening to me right now? So as your peer shared, I work at Plan International, which is a big global INGO, international non-governmental organization that works on children's rights and gender equality, particularly for the rights of girls and young people all around the world. And I didn't know anything about this truly when I was at school, when I was at Latimer. I really genuinely didn't know what feminism was. I mean, I knew what it was, like I think in my bones, like inside, internally. I didn't have a word for it. I didn't have a name for it. But when I actually look back, I'm like, I did art at GCSE, and when I look back at what I did in that, I actually did like a whole series of photos of my mum in different poses doing domestic work that I then like put paint all over and all these things. And it was definitely a commentary on gender inequality. But at the time, I was writing it all in my notebook, and I didn't even know that the word feminism could be attached to things like that. So retrospectively, I guess I've been a feminist for a very long time. But in terms of learning actually what it was and what it meant, that came a little later. So I left Latimer in 2013. I studied RE, geography, French, and oh my goodness, English. And then I went to Trinity Hall, Cambridge, and I studied philosophy and religion and theology. So it was really like the academic side was really interesting. Philosophy, I love philosophy and religion, but really the feminist work all was in sort of my extracurricular time. And the way that I first learnt about it was I was basically having dinner in one of my first few weeks, not knowing anyone, just kind of sitting there doing my own thing, having some food. And then I saw an email come through from the women's officer, and there was an email saying, tonight there's a protest. It's called Reclaim the Night. It's about street safety for women and gender non-conforming people, women including, of course, both trans women, cis women, and so on, inclusive. And so I was like, I've never been to a protest. I don't know what any of these things mean, but I definitely know that I don't want to do my homework. So I'll go to a protest and meet some people. Why not? I met in the front of the hallway to go, and there were a group of us from all different years, both undergrads and postgrads. And we went to this protest. And I think some people often think that to go to a protest, you have to be sort of like towards the end of your journey, or like, oh, you're so enlightened, like, not that that's even a thing, but you have to know everything about feminism, for example, climate justice to go to a climate march, or LGBTQIA plus rights to go to a pride march. No, in my experience, in my opinion, it's actually a great Kickstarter, like a galvanizer, to be like, wow, I'm not alone in thinking this. I'm not alone in my experiences. Look at the community around me. Look at the people power around me. So anyway, I went to it. It was truly probably the most pivotal occasion of my life. And then afterwards, there was a vigil where people shared poetry that they'd written, or their stories, and it was just very organic. People went up and talked about how they experienced not feeling safe at night, how they experienced, just the everyday life in the patriarchal system that we live in, where they go home holding their keys between their fingers as a sort of weapon because they don't feel safe, or have to carry around pepper spray because they don't feel safe, or how being groped in a club, they just see it as normal now, or how that even their loving partner has initiated sex with them, for example, and hasn't respected their boundaries and don't have full conversations or consent. So really my mind was blown and expanded in terms of what it meant, what sexual harassment or sexual violence or any form of gender-based violence meant. And then that night I went back to my room and I just went on Google and I just looked up so much, like, what is Feminism 101, stuff like that. And I came across the Everyday Sexism Project that many of you may have heard of. It was started by a really incredible British feminist called Laura Bates. And actually she started it because she would say, like, I face sexism. And people were like, no, it's, in the, I think it was 2013, women have the vote, you can do whatever job you want, you're in school, like, why are you complaining? There's no sexism, like, why are you worried about that? There's so many other things we should worry about. And she was like, well, I experience it every day. And so she created this really basic website where people could just submit stories of like anything, big or small, no matter if it was a side throwaway comment from someone, or if it was, something really horrific, really sexism. And then quickly after she launched the website, there were posts every single day, every single second, basically. It's like being updated every single second. And this website even just showed people, they said there's no such thing as sexism. You're like, well, look, all of these people from all over the world are experiencing this. So I just went through basically every single entry. There must have been like a million. And I didn't sleep at all that night. And I just like cried so much. So, oh my gosh, all of these puzzle pieces are kind of fitting together, and I'm acknowledging and realizing the impact of the patriarchy and the impact of how different systems of oppression link together. And also that night, I also got onto another page about intersectional feminism. And I realized that if I was to get to be any form of feminist at all, I wouldn't want to be a feminist if it wasn't an intersectional feminist. So that's kind of also been the running thread throughout my personal life, my advocacy and activism, and also my professional life. And intersectional feminism is, you may all be aware, is a type of feminism that was actually coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, a really incredible Black feminist, maybe around 50 years ago. And she was saying that, systems of oppression work together. For example, herself as a Black woman, she says, I'm not just a Black person one day and a woman the other day. I'm a Black woman all the time, for example, in her example. And I'm sure we all have many intersecting identities, whether it's related to gender, race, age, class, religion, caste, disability, LGBTQIA+, and so on, and the list goes on. And so it's at the foundation of intersectional feminism is realizing that we need to recognize our power and privilege, but we also need to recognize that all of these different systems of oppression overlap. So that is also very fundamental and started off my journey. So from there, then I got very involved in activism at university, started campaigning within the university to have sexual harassment called out specifically in the codes of conduct from the colleges, to have it included in policy because it wasn't included. And we also campaigned to have consent workshops as mandatory for all incoming students. And it might seem really like everyone has that now, but we are actually the first university in the UK to have that at that time. So, and now it's pretty all over. So it's really, really great. And then, yeah, just kind of continued from there and spiraled, and then became the women's officer at my college, and then so on. And then basically when I graduated, people were saying, what do you want to do? You know, my friends are doing law or consultancy basically, or banking. And then I was like, oh, I want to be a feminist, an intersectional feminist. And they're like, oh, that's not a job. You know, my family, friends, professors are like, okay, that's not a job. But turns out it is. It really is. And it's not going to be as clear and obvious because, you know, for example, if you're at university or if you're just out in the world and, you know, the capitalist companies that have lots of money, they have money to spend on trying to recruit you and take you to dinners and send you this and take you to the offices. NGOs like Plan and others, you know, we're not spending our money that way. The donations from people from all around the world, we're spending our money on action, we're spending our money on changing the lives of people and communities, and we're not really spending our time on that active recruitment. Maybe, you know, it's important also to recruit so that we have some incredible talent coming in, but really you just do a quick Google search, gender jobs, even hashtag gender jobs on Twitter, hashtag gender jobs on LinkedIn, hashtag social impact jobs, all these things you can look up, and there's thousands, if not millions of jobs in social justice, human rights, gender. You just have to do a little bit of looking, and it's there. And I also wanted to say as well, like, people often think, oh, wow, you do amazing work, Lily. That's really great. Oh, you must volunteer. Like, oh, you must just work for free. I'm like, no, it's a real job with a real salary. Live your life, live a good life. You know, it's very, very possible. I've also faced that a lot from family or from parents or friends saying, oh, well, that's all nice, but, you know, you can't live on that. And I just wanted to make that point because I know you're all probably thinking about university and careers and later down the line. And I want you to know that there is many, many careers in this area. If you're interested in it, if you're passionate about it, whether it's gender equality, whether it's climate justice, whether it's school safety, whether it's, you know, in America, ending gun violence, whether it's anything that you care about, whether it's cooking, you want to be a chef, whether it's anything, you know, you're going to work the majority of the days of the rest of your life, unfortunately, but fortunately, if it's what you love. So I just wanted to also bring that message forward because I really, truly, and this is probably annoying and maybe even obnoxious to say, but I really don't feel like I've ever like gone to work because I really care and I love what I do. And I'm not sure all of my friends who I also went to school with or went to university or friends that I'm not sure that they would always say that. So I'm just kind of saying, you know, follow your heart and your passions and you can make a go of it. And if you end up doing another job that is not related to social justice or the passions that you have, there's always ways that you can give back, not just financially, but in your time. You know, maybe you're doing a different job, but you have your evenings, you have your weekends, you can volunteer on social media. There's so many ways. So I just wanted to make sure that you are aware, like there's so many opportunities out there. And so those are some things I wanted to share. I also wanted to let you know a little bit more about what I actually do, because I know there's a lot of big words and it's confusing to think, okay, what does that actually mean in practice? So after Latimer, after university, I first started working in a gender policy think tank. And I worked on business cases and for why gender equality is important in the workplace, and also worked on comprehensive sexuality education. So changing that in British policy to make sure that comprehensive sexuality education was included as compulsory in curriculums in schools. And that was really interesting and really great foundation for me. And then I worked in Hanoi in Vietnam, and I did a women's economic empowerment internship there, where I learned the real importance of programmatic work and hearing directly from grassroots activists and women and gender non-conforming people and so on about their challenges they face and their solutions, because the people who are most affected by anything are the ones who need to be the one who have the solutions. We need to listen to the community, we need to listen to those affected. And so there's that. And then shortly after that, I didn't know what I was doing next. It's always hard to know what to, what's the next step from there. It's when you go from school to university to here, you're on a path. And then as soon as you're off that path, it can feel very overwhelming, and also very overwhelming for your mental health. I definitely faced that because suddenly you have to make all these choices and figure it out, and it feels like the whole world is on your shoulders. And I was at a cross point where I didn't know what to do next. So I just started applying for a lot of things, both masters and jobs. And then I ended up being accepted into a master's in human rights. And I also got a job at Plan International, which is where I work now. And this was in 2019. And so I decided to do my human rights master's part-time at UCL, and then also start working at Plan International full-time. So I was kind of doing both, which it actually worked out pretty well, because I had a salary and I could bring information I was learning in my academic studies into my professional work, and my professional work into my academic studies, because something I'm really care a lot about is making sure that academic work is not just kept in sort of this ivory tower, separate from the real world, separate from the programmatic, practical experiences. And at the same time, making sure that the professional world is imbued with all the current research and the work that's being done in the academic space. That was really interesting for me. And then did some work in global partnerships, so working with other NGOs, working with youth organizations, working with the UN, working with corporate companies to advance gender equality through partnerships. And I would say that partnerships is really just about relationship building. And you can do that in every area of your life, whether that's relationship building, you play a sport and you build up relationships with your team, whether it's relationship building people you meet, everywhere you are, wherever you are. And I think that relationship building and partnerships has really been at the foundation of all the advocacy that I've done, because, if you're aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, the ways we need to achieve these sustainable goals by 2030, number 17, the final one, is partnerships for the goals, because it recognizes that we can't achieve sustainable development in any area, whether it's for the planet, whether it's for the waters, whether it's for education, whether it's for gender equality, without working together cross-sectorally. So in NGO space, so civil society, in corporate sector, in the UN space, with youth movements, with grassroots activists, we all need to work together. It's like a big patchwork. We're all doing different bits. We need to connect so we can truly advance, because there's no point doing all these different things in different silos if we can't connect and we can't work together, because working together always has the biggest impact. So I think partnerships, if you were to note something down as well, is important from today. Collaboration and partnerships is always going to help you achieve your goal better and faster and stronger and united. So that was a brilliant foundation for me. And then I was based in the UK out of the global headquarters at Plan. And then I moved to New York about a year and a half ago to join our United Nations team at Plan International, because the United Nations headquarters is actually based in New York City. There's, UN in every country, but there's also UN Human Rights Council focused in Geneva. And I'm in New York, where the UN headquarters is. And actually, I belong to a team that spans New York and Geneva. So it's called our UN team. And there I moved to do youth advocacy. So basically my job is to partner through a program called She Leads, which is actually a partnership with several organizations, with girl and grassroots groups in 9 different countries across West and East Africa and the Middle East, and working directly with girls and young women in their communities to hear the incredible work that they're doing to advance girls' rights and gender equality. And then I support several of them in linking up their grassroots work with the international UN level. So how they can bring the work that they're doing in Lebanon, the work they're doing in Jordan and Mali and Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ethiopia, Uganda, Mali, Kenya, and so on, how they can link that to what's happening in the UN global space and to make change on a global policy level. So actually I'm Google meeting, zooming into you today from actually one of the busiest 2 weeks in the gender equality calendar. This week and next week is something called the CSW, which is the Commission on the Status of Women. It is a conference held by the United Nations, particularly the UN Women. And it is a conference that brings together people from every single country in the world in New York, and both virtually online. Actually, all of you can participate in it. There's something called UN Web TV. You can just Google it. That is actually live every day of the year, basically 24/7. And right now, if you go onto UN Web TV link on your computers or phones, you can watch live the UN Commission on the Status of Women. And you can be a part of this gender equality conference that happens every year for 2 weeks. It's not just a conference, though. It's a huge political process. So at the end of the 2 weeks, every single government, so every member state in the United Nations, has to agree on something called the agreed conclusions about the theme. So this year, the theme is digital and technological innovation in relation to gender equality and the rights of women and girls. And these agreed conclusions will be taken from the agreed conclusions of CSW and taken into every single country that is a member of the United Nations and implemented. So this is kind of an example of ways that we're influencing policy on a global level that then gets trickled down and implemented into every single country that is a member of the United Nations. So, you can follow along. I'm actually pretty active on Twitter this couple of weeks to bring people like live updates from what's happening at the UN. If you want to follow, it's just like at Rosengard L. So Rosengard's my last name and then L for Lily. Or just look at the hashtag on social media, hashtag CSW67, because it's the 67th Commission. And you can learn so much more. So there's that. And then the last thing that I wanted to say was just around power and privilege. So because of the society in which we live in, we are all impacted by power and privilege, and all of us hold power and hold privilege in some ways. And we all need to acknowledge that power and privilege and how it interacts with how we live our lives, how we interact with other people, how we go about our jobs, how we go about our days, how we interact with family and friends. And it could be related to different intersecting identities, whether it's, as I said before, age, gender, race, religion, caste, LGBTQIA+. If you have a disability, whether it's a visible disability or an invisible disability, that includes mental health, and so on. Recognizing that within us will help us in our approach to the world. And so there are always power dynamics at play, and hierarchy will always exacerbate those things. But just it's something that I've really learned on my intersectional feminist journey, that we all need to, take a look inwards and recognize, when we're in different spaces, whether we should be taking up that space, whether we should be, making more space for those who actually aren't seen here or aren't represented at the table, particularly when I work on youth work, particularly young people from the global south who are not represented in decision-making spaces, even though it's their fundamental human right to be. So all of these things are really key. And And so actually next week is my last week in this specific job. And then I move back to the global headquarters to work on girls' education in emergency settings. So I'm going to be the advocacy education specialist, working on ensuring that education in times of crisis, conflict, climate disaster, and so on, that girls' education especially, and gender transformative education, is seen as a life-saving priority for those who are displaced, either internally within their country, who don't get recognition at all, or refugees who have crossed borders due to conflict, crisis, and economic systems, and so on. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm fully from the end of next week. So there's really so many broad ranges of work in gender equality, and it overlaps with so many other areas too.
One question we got was, what does your average working day look like? So do you have lots of meetings or emails?
Well, hopefully when I can work from home, then I can hang out with this kitten and the other one that I have who's sitting behind the iPad. So my days, good question, they vary. Right now, because it's the CSW, I'm literally not even opening my computer because I'm running from event to speaking here to the youth advocates I have with me here from Ghana and Sierra Leone, Lebanon, bringing them to different events. So when things like this are happening, like conferences, I'm in meetings, in events, speaking, things like that. When it's not, when it's the preparation for it, then I do have a lot of meetings. They are often virtual because I work on several different regions around the world. And so we're not all based here in New York, for example. But I also have a lot of face-to-face meetings too, because a lot of advocacy is actually done through very informal channels. Really, it could even be on WhatsApp. Hey, can you grab with the government? You know, hey, I know you have a negotiation later. Can we have a quick coffee? I'll give you some messages. So a big part of advocacy, for example, is just like, for example, writing a page of girls' rights are important in this because this, and this, and then you give it to the member state, to the government, and then they just take it, like they copy and paste it and put it into what they're going to say because they're busy, they have other things to worry about. So that's kind of like what NGOs do. We try and provide all this messaging so that governments can take it on board. So yeah, that's an example. I also travel a fair bit for work as well.
We would love for you to go maybe into a bit more detail on kind of grassroots activists and how you've reached out. Would you like to?
Yeah, like how sort of, you were talking about how sort of informal communication can be, but how do you make that work in sort of reference to sort of places in the global south which might not have so much access to technology? Obviously.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for example, when I say that I work with girls in grassroots groups, it's not like me, Lily, I'm just randomly messaging a lot of grassroots activists and getting them to like work with me. So this is kind of going back to the partnerships. Not that you think that, I'm just saying that some people think that. This is where the partnerships piece is so key. So for example, 2 years ago, or probably 3 years ago now, some organizations came together, Plan International, Defense for Children, ECPAT, Terre des Hommes, and Femnet, the African Feminist Women's Network, to put in a proposal and work together to get a bunch of money from the Netherlands government, from their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we came together with a proposal on how to partner with girl and youth-led groups at the grassroots level in 9 countries that we prioritized based on need. And so from that, we won this grant. And then from there, it's the She Leads program that I work on. And then it basically went into all these countries, hired lots of people. Then their jobs in the country were then to reach out to grassroots networks on all the different channels, whether in social media or emails, or literally going into the community with flyers, working with religious leaders, working with community leaders. Are there young activists in your communities? Handing out menstrual products, talking about comprehensive sexuality education, talking about the intersections of gender and climate, these kind of things, and then partnering with them. So the partners in the She Leads program, there's like thousands of grassroots groups. And then for me, in terms of my work, I launched a cohort So to look for 15 girls that represent their organizations and represent their countries to work directly with me on United Nations advocacy. But it's not just them, it's them in representation of their entire grassroots groups and the networks that they represent. So I think like when we talk about feminist movements and grassroots activism, it's so networked and it's so linked, and that that's like a really brilliant way. Because another thing is people like will be like, oh, we want to work with you specifically, you're a great activist, we need to work with you, and then they become celebritized, and then their work gets taken out of context, and we can't do any of this work without movements like the incredible feminist gender equality movements that exist. So yeah, it's not me working with individual activists in that way, but it's like this huge networked approach.
I love what you were saying about partnerships, Lily, and just, you know, that power of partnerships is something which we know ourselves here at the school, don't we? Like the partner schools that we work with, the partnership activities that we run. You know, you can really see the amplification, isn't it? The amplification and the impact that we can have through those partnerships are so powerful. It was really lovely to hear you talking about those today. On behalf of everybody at Latimer, Lily,
thank you so much. It was an amazing talk.
Thank you so much, Lily. It's lovely to see you. I hope you remember your time at Latimer fondly. As you can see, some of us are still here. So yeah, we appreciate so much you spending your time today. I know how busy you are, and it's been really interesting. I'm sorry that lots of people have had to leave. We've just hit the end of form time and the start of lunch and activities. So thank you so much, and we'll continue to spread the message at school and to champion for that here at Latimer.